is from Matthew 5, verses 13 through 16, which you can follow along if you'd like on page 786 in your two Bibles. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and gives it light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. The word of the Lord.
It was a few years ago at one of these many conferences for pastors that I've been to over the years. We were gathered together for this seminar on church growth. It was called On Church Growth. Well, anymore, any seminar on church growth really feels like what it is church survival. It's kind of, that's where we are right now. It feels like as pastors, we're in that survival mode. The question we were asked was this: what would your town or your city be like without your church? Well, we were tempted, many of us, were tempted to be cynical in our replies. You know, like there was one cartoon I remember that shows a pack of wolves and they're howling at the full moon. And one of the wolves in the very back, he has this kind of worried look on his face, and he turns to another of his fanged friends and he says, "Do you think we're really doing any good?" Now, sometimes as a pastor's churches, it can feel like this anymore. The church seems to be, for most of our society, irrelevant and even ignored. Have faith, though. Have faith. Anytime any one of you feels insignificant and like you don't have much of an impact, remember this. Remember going to bed with that single mosquito in your room. Has an impact. In his Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said to his disciples, "You are the salt of the earth." Now, we don't hear it quite the same as they would have heard it, because for them it was quite a compliment in its day to someone to have Jesus say, "You are the salt of the earth." You know, because salt was rare and it was highly prized. The Greeks would refer to salt as the second soul of meat. Half a pound of salt was worth more than a human being on the slave market. Soldiers were paid in salt. The word salary is derived from the ancient word for salt. This is where we get the saying, he or she is worth or not worth the salt. So when Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth," this praise would have caught the attention of those disciples. They were valuable to God and to their society. They were worth their weight in salt, not in gold, as we might say today. But what does it mean practically to say that you're the salt of the earth? Well, as we know, salt has many characteristics that would be beneficial and valuable. Consider the flavor enhancing alone of the properties of salt. Okay? Frederick Fairweed. We probably, each one of us, if we've ever been to Frederick Fair more than once, we have a favorite French fry stand. What would your French fries be without that extra salt? Pretty bland, wouldn't they? And I add a little vinegar, some ketchup, more salt. Salt adds zest to a meal. So as Christians, we are to be the spice of life at school or at the office or in the classroom or down at the social club, wherever we may be. We are to be the spice of our society, of our culture. You know, the good Lord never meant Christians to be dull, lifeless killjoys. You know, most people think as Christians we're supposed to walk around like this, get cast down. Life is miserable. No, the Lord never. No, Jesus himself was the life of a party. He was invited to the wedding at Cana, and what did he do there? Brought out the best wine. No, Jesus said in John 10:10, I have come that you may have life and have it more abundantly. Yet how many Christians, as I said, they walk around like they've just eaten one of those big dill pickles from the fair. Seeing such down-faced and sour-faced Christians, it was Mark Twain who once said, I'll take heaven for the climate, but give me hell for society. Some Christians might be very surprised at the difference that they could make if they would just smile more often, if they would laugh a bit more, be less mean-spirited, and just be kind people. In a world that seems to be more at odds with each other, always looking to pick a fight and always to win. Be salt. Add flavor to all your relationships. So salt can not only add flavor, it can also, something we're very much aware of in this part of the world, is it can melt ice. Now we're coming into that season, aren't we? When a snowstorm, we hear about the snowstorm, and it's moving up the East Coast, and it's going to bring snow, and it's going to bring ice. The road crews busily start loading their trucks with salt and sand, and they use it to melt the ice. In our day, human hearts have grown frosty. Long icicles of indifference are suspended like daggers from our lives. We have our cliques, we have our racial walls, our spiteful, hateful social media posts. I don't care about God, I don't even care about you, all I care about is me. It takes salt, Christian salt, to thaw out such a society. Another story about a young lady who was looking forward to going to a concert. She and two of her friends had tickets. And in casual conversation, she mentioned that she knew of two other students who really wanted to go, but they couldn't find a ride. Well, the first three, they had room in their car, but these other two were from a different part of town, a different race. They ran with a different crowd. She suggested to her two classmates that they take the two with them. She was met with a shout, No, we're not taking them. But undaunted, the girl pressed on about how they too were human, just like themselves, and how it was time to build some bridges of kindness in their high school, and how there should be enough of her love to share with her two friends that she already has plus two more. This young woman was spreading a little salt, hoping to melt some prejudices. So what else can salt do? It can, besides add flavor and thaw ice, well, if you put enough salt on your French fries, or if you're in the movies and you got your grandchildren along, or your children along, and what do they want you to do before you go in the movie? Buy me some popcorn. Buy me some popcorn. Well, if you're going to buy popcorn, don't be cheap. You might as well buy the drink because you're going to be up to get it later if you don't. Because popcorn is salty. And after 4 or 5 handfuls, you get the elbow again and say, Grandpa, Dad, Mom, I need a drink. There's the old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make the horse drink. Well, you can add plenty of salt to the oats. And he will find water, try the water trough soon enough. In a similar way to adding flavor, our presence as Christ followers should create in others a yearning for something that they just might see in us. Does our faith keep us steady in the time of trial? Does it allow us to be less anxious in the face of stress and all the worries that there can be in our society today? We live our lives and our faith before a world that is watching. And they just might grow thirsty for something that they see in us. Which really isn't us, is it? But the Spirit of Christ that we carry in us. So salt flavors, it thaws, it promotes thirst. What does salt also do? It heals. Recall how your childhood, I do anyway, recall my childhood sore throats. What did your mom tell you to do first? Gargle with salt water. Oh, it's awful if you swallow some. Perhaps it stung a little bit, but ultimately, though, it helped. Christians are to be like this in society. Now, if you study church history, from the very beginning, you'll find Christians going to where the hurt is. Whether they're out there to heal or to heal sickness or to fight germs or whatever it may be, they were out there where there was hurt in society. For too long in the history of humankind, the sick were ignored, abandoned to die in a field, or left to wallow in a bed of pain without sufficient treatment. Christians have always understood Jesus as a healer of the sick, a man of hospitality. Following Jesus' command to his disciples, as you go, he said, proclaim this message: the kingdom of heaven has come near. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse those who have leprosy, drive out the demons. Freely you have received, freely give. Christians very early on cared for the sick and the injured. Ultimately, they began hospitals to show the love of Christ to the sick and dying. And if you look around, you'll be astounded at how many of our healing centers have their genesis in a Christian movement. One of Donna and my favorite UCC-related ministries is Crossroad in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Crossroad's mission is to create promising futures for children in difficult circumstances by providing therapy, education, and family support services. Crossroads is a place that gets the children and the kids when they have no other options. It was founded in 1883 as the Reformed Church Orphans Home of Fort Wayne, Indiana. The Reformed Church is one of our 4 historic denominations that came together to form our United Church of Christ. Christians then saw the need and came with healing salt. Along with his healing is education. The Bible tells us that Jesus could read, and that was in a day when the vast majority could not. He could also write, and again, Christians were salt. Go down the East Coast, whether it's Dartmouth, Harvard, Yale, Princeton. Everyone was started as a Christian ministries to create an educated populace. Our congregational forebears were very big on public free education. Salty Christians over the centuries have seen the need and rushed in to bring healing, founding hospitals and schools, orphanages, counseling centers, daycares, rest homes, housing, pushing for fair legislation. So yes, salt does all these things. It heals, it promotes thirst, it melts the ice, it adds flavor to life, but it's also a preservative. If you cure ham with salt, rather than spoil, it can last for a long time. Salted fish. One does not have to be on social media or watching the 24-hour news channel to get a sense that there's much going awry in our society today. We need the salt of Christian values to preserve marriages, to initiate and sustain friendships, to be an effective parent, to renew racial dialogue, and to preserve values in our society. If we withdraw, if we Christians cocoon ourselves, if we keep our salt to ourselves, then our children's world won't be fit to live in. Now, folks, don't make the mistake that faith acting as a preservative with the propensity of many congregations to maintain the status quo. Preserving the faith doesn't mean maintaining a status quo of any type. Faith acting as a preservative is not a justification for the church to use the oft-quoted phrase, what? We've never done it that way before. That's not the case here. Or another one I've heard is, well, if it's good enough for me, it's good enough for these young people. That's not what we're talking about here. In the 1930s, Hitler rose to power as a Nazi dictator. Albert Einstein watched with growing alarm, and he expected the newspapers to expose Hitler's corruption, but the media was quickly silenced. So Einstein looked to the universities to stop Hitler. Instead, they went along. In the end, only the church, some of the church, the confessing movement within the church, stood squarely in Hitler's path. Most notably, we hear of people like Karl Barth and Dietrich Bonhoeffer. This prompted Einstein to write later as like, what formerly I had no use for, I now praise unreservedly. The salty church of Jesus Christ. The pollster George Gallup writes that fewer than 10% of Americans are deeply committed Christians. These people are a breed apart. They are more tolerant of people of diverse backgrounds. They are more involved in charitable activities. They are more involved in practical Christianity. They're absolutely committed to prayer. And they are far happier than the rest of the population. Then he goes on to say that such devout Christians exert an influence on our society that far outweighs the numbers. Just like salt, it only takes a pinch to do the whole job. You are the salt of the earth, Jesus said. Quite a compliment, huh? You are the salt of the earth. Jesus didn't say that we are the sugar of the earth. He called us salt. And its wonderful properties we all share. But with that compliment comes the warning. Also in Matthew's gospel and in Mark's gospel, Jesus adds, salt is good, but if salt should lose its saltiness, how shall it be restored? It is good for nothing, but to be thrown out and trodden under foot. Heed well Christ's warning, my friends, and be what you are, for the need is great. And there are those out there who are looking at us and they're saying to us, pass me the salt, please. Amen.